Today on Design, Build, and Fix, another granite countertop fabrication video. Episode 8, we're going to show you how to cut out your sink and show you how to rod it to make sure that that sink area does not crack while you're trying to move it. All right, if you like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Let's show you how to get this done. So we're on to cutting the hole for the undermount sink, the second most stressful portion of building a countertop. By the way, the first most stressful would be the seaming of the granite. Second most stressful is the cutting out of the sink. All that work it took to get to this point, and if you mess up the sink, you're going to have to start this whole section over again, so let's hope we don't mess it up. Step 1 in sink cutout is to take your template and put it onto your countertop. Now, I don't have to put it on there. I know it curves around and I know it fits, so I got it lined up where it's supposed to be. And once you have it on there, properly positioned on your countertop, you're going to want to mark, from our template, you're going to want to mark the inside edges of the sink base. And you're going to want to mark the center. Now, when we made the template, we did the sink base center. We marked it there. We marked it there on the back also. And on our sides, I put these stretchers on here on purpose because that says sink base inside wall. So the inside wall of the sink base is there. And then we have another one over here. And then we have here on the front, it says inside wall. So that means that that's the inside wall of the sink base. And we have a mark on the back. Same thing. That's the inside wall. So what that does is it gives us the inside portion of our sink base. The next thing I did is I grabbed the sink and I placed it on there. And I found the center of the sink. And I marked it with a permanent marker with a C on it. That means center. And then here we have the sink base center. And I placed a little mark that tells me that's the center of the sink. Also, I put a mark here, which is the inside edge of the sink base. There's another one right there. I don't know if you can see that, but there's one there. And then we have another one right here. And finally, we put another one there. So that tells me when I take this off that I know that that's going to be the inside. That's the center. Once the template is gone. Now, you have to position the sink, and normally, let me move this into place. Normally, I line up my centers. I position the sink from the front edge of the countertop back anywhere between 3.5 and 4 inches. What that does for us, based on the size of the sink, is it gives us plenty of space in the back. From the edge of the sink to the inside gives us about 3 3/4 of an inch. That's about what we're going to need because we have a sink or a faucet that has to go in there, and the diameter of that faucet is about 2 1/4 or so. So that's the outside diameter. And if we have space in the back, from the edge of the sink to the wall, it's about 3 3/4. That's plenty of space to put this and drill holes and have that pop through. So, looks like everything is all set. It's all been positioned out. And we know that the distance from the front of the countertop to the inside edge of the sink is going to be about 3 5/8 of an inch. If you take a look, we're at about 3 3/4. I have to move that. I'm going to move it up a little bit, about another 1/8. As you can see, one of the things that you don't want to do is have this part of the sink on top of this, because now it's sitting on top of your cabinet. So we have about 3/8, maybe a 1/2 inch-ish. I haven't positioned it finally, but I'm going to make it about 3 5/8 inch back. Now, one of the things that you can see is I have my template, And you can see that the front edge of the countertop is here. That's because the wall that this goes on is considerably bowed. And so you want the front edge of your countertop to be perfectly straight, so when somebody sitting at the dining room table looks over that way and says, oh, that countertop is perfectly straight, as opposed to trying to make it curved. So it's going to sit back about 3/16-ish or a quarter back. So the overhang is going to be a little bit bigger. Not a big deal, but it's going to look perfectly straight. So now that we have this all set up, it's time to work with the template. Get that cut out. So step 2 in the cutout of your undermount sink is to take a look at the template. If you're lucky, the sink comes with a template. Sometimes they don't, sometimes they do. This one does. And the first thing you want to do is to verify that it's to scale. And from there to there should be 10. And if I measure it, it's definitely 10 inches. Then we want to make sure that the distance that they're saying from the left edge to the right edge of this template is the same size as the inside of the sink. And so I'm going to do that. Right now, I've already measured it. It looks like it's going to be about 3/16 of an inch short of 30. And if I measure from here to here, right there, it's about 30 inches. So this edge and this edge almost literally overhangs by about 1/16 of an inch-ish. And the way this countertop or this sink is going to be put in, we actually want a 1/4 inch overhang on all 4 sides of this sink. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to redraw lines 1/4 inch in on each side, redraw lines and cut it out. That's going to make my countertop 1/4 of an inch big or smaller than the sink. I almost always prefer, when I undermount a sink, is to make sure that the countertop overhangs it by about 1/4 of an inch, because you're going to have a caulk line here and it's nicer not to see it. Some people will actually do it so the countertop sits here and then you have stuff that comes down and then you have a lip all the way around. I'm not a big fan of that look, but this one's going to have a 1/4 inch overhang. So the next step for me is to redraw the lines and cut it out. All right, so I've modified the template. As you can see, first thing I did is I put a center line on here so I can match it up with the line that I'm going to put on my countertop when I take it out there. I put some marks, 1/4 inch in, 1/4 inch in, and then I actually used the straight edge that I cut the countertop with to draw the lines. I did that all the way around. Okay, so the template has been placed on there and traced out, and there we have it. We have the line all the way around. The corners have been marked all the way back. The only thing I have to keep in mind is that when I cut this, the blade has to be on the inside of the line, because we want to save the line, because the line is actually the outside of it, so we want to save the line. And we'll show you how to do that. We're basically going to cut our circles first on the corners and then plunge cut in along this line to get that cut. Whenever you have a sink cutout in a granite countertop, you're definitely going to be weakening the granite in front of and behind the sink. In order to prevent that from cracking, you're going to do something called rodding. And a rod is nothing more than an 1/8 inch by 1/4 inch piece of steel cut to length. You're going to cut a groove into the granite, and then you're going to put this into the groove and put this transparent flowing polyester adhesive with a hardener in it, and that's going to encapsulate that piece of steel, and that's going to make that considerably stronger, and hopefully it won't crack when you move the granite. You're going to need a few things. You're going to definitely need your saw. You're going to need the adhesive, an acetone to clean up the rod, because the rod comes with oil on it. You want to take all that oil off. You're going to need something to mark your countertop with, a can to mix up your polyester adhesive with the hardener in it, and you're going to want to be able to sand that flat. So that's going to help the integrity of the granite by making it stronger in front of and behind the sink. Normally what I do is, if the sink base is 36 inches this way, I usually go about 4 inches off, about 2 inches off of each end, so it's going to be about a 40-inch rod. I've already cut that to length. And normally what I do is I find where the 3/4 inch board for the sink base in the front and the back is, and put it right in the middle of that area. Okay. Now, as you can see, I've already flipped this stone over. It happens on the back side of it, so make sure you flip your granite over, and we'll show you how to get this thing cut and installed. All right, so now that your sink cutout is marked on the opposite side of this granite, flip it over and put your rodding in, because once you've cut your cutout for your sink, that becomes the weak part of the granite countertop, and so the rodding can be installed, and that's going to protect this countertop from cracking if you're flipping it over and moving it. Now, when you cut the slot for the rod, it's going to require 2 passes because the rod is actually wider than 1 pass of your saw. Now, they do make a blade that's wide enough to do in 1 pass, but I don't have one, so I did 2. Also, make sure you use acetone to take the oil off, and yes, gloves are definitely going to be a must because you're using a polyester adhesive. Once you get that out and your gloves on, now you're going to mix this up and make sure you pour that into your slot. And once it's poured in, make sure that your rod goes in, push it down, it gets all the air out, and then you're actually going to just put another layer right on top of it. No big deal if that polyester adhesive flows over the top. Not a big deal, because once you're done, all you're gonna do is sand that smooth. All right, so now you can flip your countertop over after that's been fixed and finished up. Now what you're gonna do is make sure you cut your 4 corner holes using your hole saw, because that 3-inch rounded hole saw is gonna give you perfectly rounded corners. So I now have all 4 of my holes cut for the corners of my sink. Now, one of the things I need to share with you is when you cut your holes, if you have a hole saw, make sure that there's some support underneath the granite where it gets cut, the part that's going to be saved, which is this curved part, so that when you push through with a hole saw, it doesn't blow out the bottom. You're going to have to slide your granite piece around a little bit. Not a big deal. It's getting a little bit lighter every time you make a cut. Now, the next thing is, if you don't have a hole saw for your corners, what you're going to want to do is, I'm going to show you how to do this here shortly. You're going to make a straight cut on the inside of this line all the way from apex of the circle, which is where it goes to the highest point, all the way back to this side to the apex, and then stop. And then you'll do the same thing on this side, on the inside, apex to apex. And once you've done that on all 4 of your sides, then you can come back and make diagonal cuts here and here all the way out until you actually get to the point where it cuts all the way through. And then this piece will come out. Once this piece is out, you're going to have a whole bunch of stuff left over in here. Then all you're going to do is make vertical cuts into the granite up to the line. Don't take anything past the line. Go up to the line, because your circular cut is highest on the top. On the bottom it cuts down. And once you get more of that material, you can keep kind of just cutting and cutting and cutting until you actually form this circle. It's a lot easier with a hole saw, so if you can afford to buy a hole saw, I would do that. All right, so now we're actually going to finish this cut up by doing a plunge cut into the granite from apex of hole to apex of hole. Now, there's 2 things you have to be concerned with. The first thing is make sure that when you plunge the blade down, that it stays tight against the fence, and make sure you don't plunge it too deep next to your 3-inch hole, because that will cut into it and give you a groove that you won't be able to get out. To get the sink cutout out, we have to go in there and clean up these little cuts here that the saw can't get. You have one here, and you'll have one on each side of every one of your round holes. Now what I've done is I've taken my 5-inch blade and put it in my angle grinder, and all I'm going to do is to dive into these holes at this kind of an angle here in order for that to come out, and I'll clean out this a little bit later. Once all those tabs are gone, this slab will come out. So just like we did on the corners of the countertop, we have the corners of our sink cut out here, and we have to clean these little edges up. And we're just going to take our angle grinder, clean those up, and once we get all those cleaned up with the angle grinder, we're going to go in there with the 50 grit sandpaper, and we have to get rid of all those little tiny saw marks that are on there with the 50 grit. All right, so I've chosen to use the angle grinder to get those nubs off because it comes off considerably faster. Now, one of the things you have to be concerned with is making sure that you keep that vertical cut of your sink cutout perfectly straight up and down. Now, I do have a video, episode number 7, that shows you how to do all this polishing that we're starting to do right now. Now that the sink cutout has been taken out and has been prepped for edging, I basically put the template back onto the countertop so I could draw the line on here so it scribes to the wall. If I move this back, you can see I have that line on there. All I'm going to do is take an angle grinder on here and cut it back to that line, and it should scribe very close to the wall once installed. So here we go. The countertop has been fabricated to this point. Everything goes back together. I placed it on the tilt table to make sure that it matched up with the template, to make sure everything was exactly the size that it needed to be. And it was. You're always going to want to make sure you check that. I've scribed the back edge. As you can see, it's kind of ins and out, and that should match the wall. The front edge of this, absolutely straight. So the only thing left to do is do a slight round over on this edge. Then on this surface here, we have to put our 3/8 radius along with around the sink and polish those surfaces, and the edging and the polishing of those surfaces is no different than we showed you in the past. Alright, well, thanks for watching the video. If you like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel. We have more videos coming out shortly. We'll see you on the next one.